Hello and welcome to a series of Target Prelims 2019. Coming to the first topic of discussion, today we will be discussing a very important government scheme, which is the Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana. This was a scheme that initiated in the budget of 2015 to 16. Now the scheme has been envisaged for 5 years, so that is something that becomes important vis-a-vis this scheme. Now one thing that you need to know here are the two objectives. The first objective is that of extending the coverage of irrigation. So the idea here is Har Khet Ko Pani. And the second is that of improving the water use efficiency. So the idea here is per drop more crop. So these are the two slogans, the two philosophies. Also, what is important is that this scheme is formed after the amalgamation of already continuing few schemes. The first amongst them is the Accelerated Irrigation Benefit Program, that is the AIBP. Now this was under the Ministry of Water Resource. So this is the first ministry that is involved here. The second scheme is the Integrated Watershed Management Program. Now this was under the Department of Land Resources in the Ministry of Rural Development. So this is the third ministry that is involved in this scheme. And the third scheme, that is of on-farm water management, that is OFMP. Now this is another important scheme. This was a scheme that was under the Department of Agriculture and Cooperation, and this is a scheme that was under the Ministry of Agriculture. So this is something that is important here. Next, what is important is the implementation aspect. Now here this scheme has a decentralized implementation, which is through the state and district irrigation plans. Also, what is important is the funding aspect. Now there is a net budget of 5,000 crore which has been set aside for this particular scheme to be implemented in 5 years. And under the scheme, a separate fund is what has been created, that is the micro irrigation fund. What is important is that the funding is what is managed by NABARD. So this is the bank, and this can be a question. NABARD is responsible for extending loans to the state governments. It has an annual target of 2 million hectare per year of land that should be covered or brought under irrigation. The philosophy, as I've discussed previously also, is per drop more crop and Har Khet Ko Pani, which means every field should get water. Irrigation should be provided to each and every field. So that is all about this particular scheme. Indeed, an important one. Anytime a question can be expected. Coming to the next scheme which we will discuss today, it is the RKVY, which is also known as Raftar. Now RKVY stands for the Rashtriya Krishi Vikas Yojana. Now these kind of names which are difficult to remember, or this mnemonic associated, which is Raftar, that is associated with this, makes it a prime example that it can come in UPSC. Raftar stands for Remunerative Approaches for Agriculture and Allied Sector Rejuvenation. So that is why it's called Raftar. Now coming to the first important point, which is that it is an ongoing centrally sponsored scheme, and this was a scheme that started in the 11th 5-year plan. Now as you all know, we are done away with the 5-year plans, so it is extended for 3 more years. So that is something that is important about this scheme. Another thing that is important is that the scheme will incentivize states in enhancing allocation to agriculture to achieve 4% growth rate in agriculture sector. So all the states who are targeting this growth rate, they will be incentivized under this particular scheme. Another thing that is important is that this scheme provides for flexibility and autonomy to states in planning their programs that they want to implement vis-a-vis agriculture and other agriculture allied sectors. So that is one important aspect about the scheme. This being a centrally sponsored scheme, there will be a funding sharing, which will be the normal pattern of funding sharing in all centrally sponsored schemes, which is 60-40 for normal states, and it is 90-10 for northeastern states and union territories, and 100% central government sponsoring for UT. So this is one thing that you should remember vis-a-vis fund sharing of all centrally sponsored schemes. Next, what is important is that the allocation is based on the state's plan expenditure for agriculture. So this is something that you need to know, that more the state is going to spend on agriculture, more will be the support that it will get under Raftar. Another thing that is important is the preparation of state and district agriculture plans, which is mandatory under the scheme. And next, what is important is that it aims at creation of an agriculture infrastructure, which starts from inputs that are required for agriculture, proper information to the farmers, into the agri markets are something that are also envisaged under this particular scheme. So this is something that becomes important. Such kind of technical questions are sometimes that UPSC tends to ask. So we should be well prepared for all of that. Now some sub-schemes under the RKVY is what is important. The first sub-scheme is that of bringing green revolution to Eastern India. The second sub-scheme is that of additional fodder development program. The third is that of saffron mission. You should know that India is aiming on a saffron mission, especially in states like Jammu and Kashmir. Next, what is important is the crop diversification program, which is envisaged under this particular scheme. Next, what is important is livestock health and disease control. Here, the foot and mouth disease is what it is largely going to be focused upon. So that is something that you need to know. Next, what is important is the scheme of beekeeping. And the seventh is that of targeting rice fallow area. So these are the sub-schemes. Question can be asked in that regard. So that is going to be the importance. Coming to the next article, IBSA declaration. Now this is from the current affairs of June 2018, which we are discussing currently. Now this is important because the ministerial meet of IBSA is what was held in Pretoria in South Africa. So that is the first question. Next, what is important is that it adopted a declaration along with the South-South cooperation. Now, what are the points of this declaration? We shall be discussing those also, but those are not something that are going to be important for prelims. For prelims, what is important is that you know about this organization IBSA, you know about the South-South cooperation. So that is the main aspect of prelims. First and foremost, you should know about IBSA that this is an international tripartite grouping of India, Brazil and South Africa, which is evident in the name IBSA itself. Another thing that you should know that this was formally established by the Brasilia Declaration on the 6th of June 2003, and later it was this organization which later developed into the BRICS. This is the forefather of BRICS in one way. Another thing that is important is that these three countries are the important poles for galvanizing South-South cooperation between three continents. Now, what is this South-South cooperation? This is largely an exchange and sharing of developmental solutions among the countries in global South. So, three continents which are involved here are Asia, Africa, and South America. And one country from each, the major countries from each of these three continents is what is a part of IBSA. In Asia, India is a major country in the South Asia. And in Africa, it is South Africa, and in Southern America, it is Brazil. So these three countries are championing the cause of SSC, which is the South-South cooperation. This is something that becomes important because UPSC has a tendency to sometimes ask about organization and sub-organizations under organization. So SSC is linked to IBSA, and this can be a question. Also, what is important is about the IBSA fund, which is managed by the UN Office of South-South Cooperation. So this itself can be a question that it is managed by a UN office. Another thing that is important vis-a-vis the fund is that there are 19 countries that are participating in this particular fund. Also, what you need to know here is about the South-South cooperation. Now, this is an exchange and sharing of developmental solution among countries in the global South, as I already discussed. Also, you should know that its formation is something that can be traced to the Asian African Conference that took place in Bandung in Indonesia. This is the very, very famous Bandung Conference of 1955, which even Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru attended. So, this is one important aspect that you should know about this conference. Historical aspect is what is related to it. So that is something that you need to know. Some points of this particular declaration are that there is a common endeavor of people and countries of the South. Also, it calls for developing countries as developing partners. It calls for solidarity and spirit of sharing amongst all these countries. This organization is what is going to be voluntary in nature. This is going to have a demand-driven process of growth of all these countries. There's going to be respect for national sovereignty. So these are the points which are there in the declaration. The points become important for means aspect, but for prelims, the organization is what is important. Coming to the next organization that we shall be discussing today, this is the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. This was in news in the month of June because some extra powers have been given to the OPCW, and these powers are what India has objected to. India has not ratified additional powers to this organization. Now, coming to some issues coming to some important points vis-a-vis this organization, which are going to be important for prelims. The first point is that it was established in the year 1997. It is the implementing body for the Convention on Prohibition of the Development, Production and Stockpiling and the Use of Chemical Weapons. So this is one thing that becomes important, the convention itself. Another thing that is important are the 4 key provisions under this organization. The first mandate of this particular organization is to destroy all existing chemical weapons. The second mandate is that of monitoring chemical industry to prevent new weapons from emerging. The third is of providing assistance and protection to state parties against any chemical threats. And fourth is that of fostering international cooperation to strengthen implementation of the convention. This has a membership of 193 countries. India is a member of this country. Of this particular organization, Israel has signed this particular convention but has not ratified it, and some countries like Egypt, North Korea, Palestine, South Sudan have neither signed nor have ratified, obviously. So that is one thing that is important. Also, you should know that the 2013 Nobel Peace Prize was won by this organization, that is Organization for Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. That was because it has destroyed 90% of chemical weapons that were there on the face of earth have already been destroyed by this organization. Also, what is important under this particular organization is the Hague Award. This is the award that is given by the OPCW to any country or organization that works towards destruction of chemical weapons. So this is something that you need to know about OPCW. So that's all for today's discussion. I thank you all for watching the video.